So talk about doing that initial meeting. What type of conversation are you having with the parent? Because again, what the parent may think is one thing, what the child may think is another thing, or if the child isn't saying anything, or if the parent isn't saying anything, if it's only one of them, how are you gauging what's really going on here? What's really, uh, what path should I take this family
So when my parents call me, I'm listening first. It's a lot. And most of the time when parents reach out for an education advocate, they've been through some storms.
on?
So first it's let me listen. Let me let you out. Let me give you the opportunity to let everything out. And then let's start dissecting this. What are you looking to accomplish? What would you like to see your child succeed in? Sometimes it's my child has really disruptive behavior. I'm getting calls every day about the behavior. What can I do? Sometimes it's academics and behavior. And then sometimes it's academics. I then immediately, so once I hear my parents' concerns, I say, okay, what's the plan? This is the plan. I start to immediately do a consent form to start pulling information. What do you have, mom and dad? And what do you have, school? Let's see if this aligns. Now, if the child is, sometimes I get a student that may be in the first grade. Then I'll ask, what does your day look like in school? What does the paper look like? What does your homework look like? And sometimes a student can really articulate, this is frustrating to me when my teacher does this to me. Or this is frustrating when I'm trying to do this math problem, but it looks like this. Some of our students are twice exceptional, which means they're actually gifted, but they also have a learning disability. So some schools only see the gifted part. So they don't pay any attention that the child may be a dyslexic and struggling. And then on the other hand, they only see the dyslexic or the autism or the ADHD component, and that the child is not smart. So sometimes, the child is smart. So sometimes that's a conflict. And it requires conversations, honest conversations. When I tell my parents, you're trusting me with your child, and I respect that, and I honor that, and thank you, that means I'm going to do what I need to do. So sometimes that's a Sunday morning call before I go to church. Good morning. Hey, I'm just checking in. How's things going? We have a meeting next week. What are your questions? What are your concerns? How are you feeling? And sometimes we might be done with the meetings. I'm just going to call and check in. How are things going? How are you feeling? Do you feel like he's making progress? Do we need to pull some other information? So with an IEP, it's important to look at the progress reports. Because sometimes grades look great, but is the student making progress? And sometimes, to be completely honest, sometimes the schools aren't completing the progress report. So you really don't know what your child is really progressing in or not. That's another issue. Now we really need to have some conversations because I don't know if my child is meeting their goals. And in an IEP, there's benchmarks, So let's just say, Leah is supposed to read 120 words at 90% accuracy by next year. Well, if you're not filling out the progress report at school, how do I know that she's reaching that goal? We don't know. And so when I'm working with my parents, I want to give them tools. I want to make sure they understand their rights. I want my students to know their rights. Do you know that you can ask for an audiobook so that you can hear the book and not read the book, or do both? That's a part of your accommodations. And sometimes the students aren't aware of it, and that's really, something parents can kind of work with the teachers with. Like, for my daughter, I typed up all her accommodations on the back of her Chromebook. This is what you can ask for if you need to. You don't have to feel like overwhelmed in class. If you're struggling to read the book, you can listen to it, but I still want you to follow along. Because my goal is to empower my child to advocate for themselves. And an IEP is supposed to give your children the tools to learn the curriculum and hopefully not need the IEP and go to a 504. And if the child does need an IEP until they finish high school, that's okay too. Let's not make things that much harder for them. but encourage them and empower them so that when they're in school, they feel like they can reach the goals that we've set for them. They're confident. And that's important to me with my clients and the students that I work with, that they feel comfortable, confident, and they can advocate for themselves. When we're working on learning styles, it might be the student is visual and audio, and that's okay. It's part of advocating for themselves.